New developments tonight in the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, more than 4 months after she disappeared from her Tucson home. Volunteers in Mexico say they received a tip about where her remains could be. 12 News reporter Maria Stobbs is here with the latest. Maria?
Mark, that's right. This search group regularly looks for missing people, and they've helped find the remains of dozens of people in the Nogales area. But this is the first time they've received a tip that specifically mentioned Nancy Guthrie.
Okay. So,
before you believe everything you've heard about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, there's something you need to know, because tonight, everything may have changed. For 132 days, investigators searched. For 132 days, questions piled up. And for 132 days, the mystery surrounding Nancy Guthrie only grew darker. But now, an anonymous caller has emerged in the shadows with information so specific, so disturbing, that search teams were sent across the border into Mexico within hours. Think about that. Someone knew a location. Someone knew a route. Someone knew enough details to point searchers toward a remote area known as the Mariposa area. A place already surrounded by rumors, secrets, and stories nobody wants to talk about. So who made the call? A witness? An accomplice? Or someone carrying a secret they can no longer keep buried? Because here's where things get even stranger. The location named by the caller sits almost perfectly along the same route investigators have quietly been examining for months. Coincidence? Maybe. But in cases like this, coincidences have a funny habit of turning into headlines. Tonight, we're following the trail from Tucson to the isolated deserts of Sonora. We're breaking down the anonymous tip, the hidden location, the unanswered questions, and the possibility that someone, somewhere, knows exactly what happened to Nancy Guthrie. Because if this lead is real, then the biggest breakthrough in this entire mystery may have just arrived, and what happens next could change everything. The question is no longer whether this case is unusual. The question is how many people knew more than they were willing to admit. Because what happened next caught even veteran observers off guard. The anonymous call didn't go to a major television network. It didn't go to the Pima County Sheriff's Department. And it didn't go to the FBI. Instead, it went directly to Buscando Corazones Nogales, a volunteer search organization operating deep inside Mexico. That detail matters, because whoever made the call appeared to know exactly who would take the information seriously. Within hours, search teams were moving, vehicles were loaded, coordinates were reviewed, and discussions began about a location inside the Mariposa area, a place that most people had never heard of until now, a place surrounded by miles of unforgiving terrain, a place where secrets could remain hidden for years. Now pause for a second, because this is where the timeline becomes difficult to ignore. Nancy Guthrie vanished 132 days ago. No confirmed sightings, no verified communications, no physical evidence explaining where she went. Just questions, thousands and thousands of questions. Yet suddenly an unknown voice appears out of nowhere claiming to know where searchers should look. Not a city, not a region, not a vague direction. A specific area, a specific landmark, a specific location. How does someone know that? That is the question investigators cannot stop asking. And the deeper you look into it, the stranger becomes, according to individuals familiar with the search effort. Volunteers immediately recognize the significance of the location, not because they believed the caller, but because of where the caller pointed them. The Mariposa area is not ordinary wilderness. Over the years, rumors have circulated about hidden sites, abandoned trails, and locations few outsiders ever visit. Most of those stories are impossible to verify. Some are probably exaggerated. But every mystery develops its own mythology, and Mariposa area already had plenty of it, which means when the anonymous tip arrived, nobody laughed, nobody dismissed it, nobody ignored it. Instead, they started moving, fast, very fast. Now here's another detail that deserves attention. The anonymous caller reportedly never identified themselves. No name, no explanation, no history, no relationship to Nancy Guthrie. Nothing, just information, and then silence. Think about that. Imagine knowing something important enough to launch a search operation. Imagine carrying information that could potentially change an entire investigation. then imagine refusing to say who you are. Why? Fear? Guilt? Protection? Or something else entirely? Because there are only a few possibilities. Either the caller was guessing, the caller heard a rumor, or the caller knew something. And right now, nobody can say which explanation is correct. Meanwhile, back in Tucson, public interest exploded. Online forums lit up. Comment sections erupted. Social media timelines filled with theories. Some people called the tip a breakthrough. Others called it distraction. A few called it the most important development since Nancy Guthrie disappeared. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Almost nobody had answers. And if you followed major mystery cases before, you already know what happens next. Theories multiply faster than facts. Speculation spreads faster than evidence. And suddenly everyone becomes an investigator. One post claimed the anonymous caller must have been a witness. Another suggested the caller had insider knowledge. A third insisted the entire thing was a carefully planned misdirection. By the end of the day, thousands of people were debating a voice nobody had heard and a person nobody could identify. But while the internet argued, search teams kept working because, unlike the online world, they weren't interested in theories. They were interested in what was physically in front of them: the terrain, the coordinates, the landscape, the possibility that something had been overlooked. And according to several accounts, conditions were far from easy. The area was remote. The ground was uneven. The search zone stretched farther than many people realized. Hours passed, then more hours. The anticipation grew. Every update created new expectations. Every silence created new questions. And then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The first search concluded. Nothing definitive was found. No confirmation. No breakthrough. No dramatic discovery. At least not yet. For some observers, that should have been the end of the news. But it wasn't, because the search organization immediately announced something unexpected. They weren't finished. Not even close. They intended to return. They intended to continue. And they believed additional areas still needed examination. That statement changed everything, because now the focus shifted away from what had been found and toward what might still be waiting, somewhere beyond the areas already searched, somewhere deeper inside the sector, somewhere closer to location described by the anonymous caller. And suddenly the mystery became larger than before, not smaller, larger, because now there were two separate questions. Where's Nancy Guthrie? And who made the call? The second question may be just as important as the first, because every anonymous tip creates a trail, maybe not a physical trail, but a human one, a chain of knowledge, a chain of conversations, a chain of connections. Somebody heard something, somebody saw something, somebody decided to speak. The challenge is figuring out why. And tonight, as search efforts continue and speculation intensifies, one reality remains impossible to escape. Somewhere in this news is a missing piece, a detail nobody has connected yet, a fact nobody fully understands, a voice nobody can identify. And until that missing piece is found, the mystery of Nancy Guthrie refuses to let go. Be why the following morning, the mystery had taken on a life of its own. What started as a single anonymous phone call was now dominating conversations across Tucson. Everywhere people looked, there was another theory, another rumor, another alleged sighting, another person claiming they knew something nobody else knew. And yet, despite all the noise, one fact remained unchanged. Nancy Guthrie was still missing. But then something happened that investigators could not easily dismiss. Sources close to the ongoing search began quietly discussing details that had never been part of the public conversation. Details that raised a disturbing possibility. What if the anonymous caller wasn't simply pointing searchers toward a location? What if they were pointing them toward a news? Because according to several reports circulating among search volunteers, the caller appeared unusually confident, not emotional, not uncertain, not speculative. Confident, the kind of confidence that comes from knowledge, the kind of confidence that makes experienced investigators stop and pay attention. And that is where things started getting strange. Very strange. You see, The Mariposa area isn't just another stretch of desert. Locals have whispered about that area for years. Abandoned trails, unmarked pathways, vehicles appearing and disappearing at unusual hours. Stories nobody could ever fully verify. Most people ignored those stories. Until now, suddenly every old rumor was being dragged back into the spotlight. And with every rumor came a new question. Could Nancy Guthrie somehow be connected to a secret hidden inside that remote sector? Or was somebody deliberately trying to make people believe that? The timing certainly didn't help, because just as public attention exploded, another unexpected development emerged. Several online accounts began posting maps, routes, timelines, theories connecting Nancy's disappearance to locations nobody had seriously discussed before. Within hours, those posts were spreading everywhere. Millions of views, thousands of comments, endless speculation, and somewhere inside all that chaos was a possibility that investigators hate more than anything: misdirection. Because if someone wanted to confuse an investigation, this would be the perfect way to do it. Flood the public with theories, create competing narratives, generate uncertainty, make it impossible to separate fact from fiction. The result? Confusion. And confusion protects secrets. Now here's where things become even more controversial. A retired investigator identified only as Source 7 claimed there was something unusual about the anonymous tip itself. Not what it said, but how it was delivered. According to the source, people who genuinely want to help investigations usually provide follow-up information, additional details, clarifications, something, anything. But this caller? Nothing. One call, one location, then complete silence, almost as if they wanted searchers to find something, but didn't want to be around when they did. And if that's true, the implications are enormous, because it means the caller may know far more than anyone realizes. Meanwhile, pressure was building on the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Questions were arriving faster than answers. Citizens wanted updates. Reporters wanted statements. Online commentators wanted conclusions. But investigators had none. At least none they were willing to share. Instead, officials continued repeating the same message. The investigation remained active. Every lead was being reviewed. Every possibility was being considered. A careful statement, a cautious statement, but not a comforting one. Because in high-profile mysteries, silence often creates more suspicion than information. And people notice. They always do. Soon attention shifted toward another question entirely. What if the anonymous caller wasn't the only person keeping secrets? Think about it. Cases like this rarely involve a single piece of information. Knowledge spreads. Conversations happen. People talk. Friends tell friends. Secrets leak. Which means if one person knew enough to place that call, who else stayed silent? Who else heard something and dismissed it? Those questions fueled another wave of speculation, and the internet responded exactly as expected, with absolute chaos. Some users claimed a witness was finally cracking under pressure. Others insisted a former associate had decided to talk. A few even suggested the caller feared becoming the next mystery if they revealed their identity. Extreme? Absolutely. But mysteries thrive on extremes. That's why people can't stop watching. And then came another twist. Search teams reportedly returned to areas near the original search zone, not because they had discovered evidence, but because they believed portions of the terrain required closer examination. That announcement immediately reignited public interest. Why go back? What did they see? What made them think another search was necessary? Officials offered no detailed explanation, and once again, the absence of answers created a vacuum quickly filled by theories. By nightfall, social media was flooded with dramatic claims, some believable, some ridiculous, some so outrageous they sounded like movie plots. Yet hidden among those theories was a reality nobody could ignore. The search was continuing. The anonymous caller remained unidentified, and Nancy Guthrie remained missing. 3 facts, 3 mysteries, 1 increasingly complicated news. And perhaps the most unsettling detail of all, the person who made that phone call is still out there, watching, listening, following every headline. following every search, knowing whether the information they provided was true, false, or something in between. Think about that for a moment. While investigators search, while reporters speculate, while millions of people debate what happened, one person already knows more than everyone else. One person already knows why that location was chosen. One person already knows what inspired that call. The only question is whether they'll speak again. Because if they do, everything could change. And if they don't, the mystery surrounding Nancy Guthrie may become even darker than anyone imagined. And that brings us to the question nobody can stop asking. What happens next? Because despite all the theories, all the speculation, and all the headlines, the reality is surprisingly simple. Someone made that call. Someone chose that location. And someone, somewhere, knows why. The deeper investigators look into the mystery of Nancy Guthrie, the more obvious one fact becomes. This case is no longer just about a disappearance. It is about information. Hidden information, missing information, information that appears to exist in the hands of people who have not yet come forward. And that should concern everyone following this news, because history has shown us something important. Major mysteries rarely stay buried forever. Eventually somebody talks. Eventually somebody slips. Eventually somebody decides carrying a secret is harder than revealing it. The question is whether that moment is days away, weeks away, or still far over the horizon. Meanwhile, the search effort continues. The Mariposa area remains under intense scrutiny. Every path, every landmark, every remote corner is now being viewed through a completely different lens. What once appeared to be just another isolated stretch of terrain has suddenly become the center of one of the biggest mysteries in recent memory. And every passing day adds more pressure. Pressure on investigators. Pressure on witnesses. Pressure on anyone who may know more than they've admitted. Because the longer this news continues, the harder it becomes for secrets to remain hidden. But here's the twist that many people aren't considering. What if the anonymous caller never intended to solve the mystery? What if the goal was something else entirely? Think about it. A single phone call redirected attention. A single phone call triggered a search. A single phone call changed the conversation. That's an extraordinary amount of influence for one unidentified person. And it raises a chilling possibility. Maybe the caller wanted investigators looking exactly where they're looking now. Maybe they wanted attention focused on that specific location. Maybe the tip was a clue. Or maybe it was a distraction. Right now, nobody knows. And that's exactly what makes this news so fascinating. Because every answer creates new questions. Every development creates new uncertainty. Every lead creates another mystery. It's like chasing a shadow through the desert. Just when you think you're getting closer, it shifts again. And yet, one thing remains impossible to ignore. The call happened. The search happened. The questions remain. Which means the news is far from over. In fact, many observers believe the most important chapter may still be ahead. The chapter where investigators discover who made the call. The chapter where new evidence finally emerges. The chapter where the missing pieces begin falling into place. Or perhaps, the chapter where everything people thought they knew turns out to be wrong. Because mysteries have a habit of doing exactly that. They lure people toward one conclusion before revealing another. They create certainty before destroying it. And this case has followed that pattern from the very beginning. Tonight, somewhere beyond the headlines, beyond the online debates, and beyond the endless theories, the truth still exists, unchanged, waiting, hidden behind unanswered questions and missing details. The mystery of Nancy Guthrie remains unsolved. The anonymous caller remains unidentified. And the search continues. But if there is one lesson to take from everything we've discussed, it's this: stories like this don't stay quiet forever. Sooner or later, somebody knows too much. Sooner or later, somebody says something they shouldn't. And sooner or later, the truth finds a way into the light. The only mystery left is who will reveal it first. So here we are, 132 days. Countless theories, thousands of tips, one anonymous phone call, and a mystery that somehow becomes stranger every time a new detail emerges. Because after everything you've heard tonight, the anonymous caller, the Mariposa area, the cross-border search, the unanswered questions, and the growing possibility that someone out there knows far more than they've ever admitted. One question still refuses to disappear. What do you think really happened to Nancy Guthrie? Was the anonymous caller trying to help investigators finally uncover the truth? Or was the entire tip designed to send everyone in the wrong direction? And perhaps the biggest question of all, who made that call? Because somewhere tonight, that person is watching the headlines, watching the searches, watching the theories spread across the internet, knowing something the rest of the world does not. And whether they're a witness, a source, or simply someone carrying a secret they can no longer ignore, their next move could change everything. So now I want to hear from you. Drop your theory in the comments below. If you were investigating this case, what would be your next step? Do you believe the answer lies inside the Mariposa area? Or do you think the real truth is hiding somewhere nobody has looked yet? And if you've made it this far, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because this news is moving fast. New developments could emerge at any moment. New leads could appear. New questions could surface. And when they do, you want to be here. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, sometimes the biggest mysteries aren't the ones we don't know. They're the ones somebody already knows, but isn't ready to tell.